All right, good. So Ephesians chapter 4, and there's a block of text there from verse 17 down through verse 32. Ephesians 4:17 through 32. So there's a whole bunch of stuff there, and I'll sort of give the overview to it without reading everything just precisely word for word at this point. So July 27th, 1943, that's a long time ago. And on that day, there was this order number 227. This was an order that was issued by Joseph Stalin, and the order was something like not one step backward. The entire sort of thing, is a little bit longer, but the idea was the Nazi Germany on the move, the aggression in Russia, and in particular two cities, Leningrad and Stalingrad. And Stalingrad had been attacked. The Russian defenses were there, fine, but Stalin was concerned, that the defenses wouldn't hold. So when Leningrad is in jeopardy, he issues this order, 227, not one step backward. I'm trying to get the entire quote here. He says, panic makers and cowards must be liquidated on the spot. Not one step backward without orders from higher headquarters. Commanders who abandon a position without an order from higher headquarters are traitors to the fatherland. We tell them, don't give any ground. Don't give any foothold. Hold your ground. Well, as it turns out, Leningrad really didn't need that order. They actually had taken care of it themselves. This one pamphlet had been circulating around to the people. Russians, destroy the German landowners. Drive the Germans from the land of the Soviets. Going around. Really didn't need his order. But the idea was these were people that were on, high alert. There was an imminent threat, and they were going to deal with that imminent threat. It's in that kind of context that we look at what Paul is saying here in this particular passage. So it seems odd, because you say, well, wouldn't you go to Ephesians 6 for this? The war, all that. He trails out, finally, my brother, be strong in the Lord and the power of his might, put on the whole armor of God that you might be able to, this, that. But here, it doesn't seem to make that connection, but yet it does. He is emphasizing, beginning in chapter 4, verse 1, about unity, Christian unity. Verse 3, what does he say? Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. So, he's talking about unity here, and then he's calling upon, in this passage, for people to abandon former ways of living, this way of life that they had before they came to know Jesus as their Savior. I mean, that makes sense, right? This is Paul trying to say, listen, this is how you're to positively live. First few chapters of Ephesians is a lot of kind of principle stuff or theological stuff. This is who God is. This is how God saved you. And then the living out of that are the last 3 chapters. So he's deeply concerned with how they approach not only their own personal life, but life within the Christian community. So in verses 17 through 19, he reminds them of their previous life apart from Christ. He does this. So I tell you and insist on it in the Lord that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do, right? This is his emphasis. Don't do that. That's how you used to live. But now something has changed. Of course, he's already described that in the first part of the book. This is what's changed. This is what happened. Now align your life with what you know to be true. This is what God has made you in Christ. And now align your life with that. A whole bunch of other stuff that he's going to support that with. But he's basically reminding them about their previous life when they were outside of Christ. And then he exhorts them verses 20 to 24, exhorts them to discard the old stuff, put off the old, put on the new. The tense, the aorist tense there, it has to do with in this particular situation. It's not a once for all type of thing. It's like situational, When I'm dealing with this, I need to remember the difference between old and new, who I was, who I am, and align myself with the reality of what God has made me in Christ. That's what I need to do. So he's exhorting them to do that. In verses 25 through 32, believers are called, then he says, to show integrity, kindness, grace, things like this. And they must overcome what? Bitterness, anger, learn to forgive. You say, wow, that's all good stuff. But then you say, he's not singling out any one, but he's saying, listen, all of these things are so detrimental to the body, to the assembly. So he is talking about body life here and what could pose an imminent threat to the health of that assembly, And this is where he's coming at with this. So he's in fact, hey, this stuff is really, really important. We've got to take stock, not only ourselves of what God has made us and who we are, but then collectively as a group. So again, verse 3, right? Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. That's an interesting thing, and you want to pull that apart a little bit. To me, then the Spirit is the means of maintaining that. So, you go outside and take a look at the brick buildings, and you see brick and mortar, brick and mortar, brick and mortar. Without the mortar, what do you have? The pile of something, bricks, and the wind comes along. And so I look at the Spirit this way. The Spirit is that type of this, the bond of peace, the peace that the Spirit brings. He's the reason. So it's the life of the Spirit in the community, what he brings, what he does. And it is interesting, right? Because you could start Ephesians chapter 1, start going all the way through, and you find out about regeneration and how that works and, all that. And you just start to see the role that the Holy Spirit plays. And he's not going to stop there. And Paul's going to say, listen, so that thing has to be, maintained, not just salvation. But, what does he say? The unity, right? So that's different. So, something about that. He's saying there's an imminent threat to all of this. An imminent threat. And we have to recognize that. Something that could destroy unity. Okay, we get that. But they're supposed to be on the state kind of readiness. So I give you like 3 stages of readiness. This is my own manufacture. I say get ready, stay ready, be ready. Those 3 things. That's what I tell myself every day, hopefully. But get ready means, well, okay, I have to know something in order to get ready. I have to know something. I have to plan to know something. How does this work? What's involved in this whole thing? Stay ready would be to endure and resist. So I've got to persist in this thing. I've got to resist what? Resist what James would call taking the path of least resistance, that kind of thing. Okay, resist, persist, and all this. Be ready means to watch, to be vigilant, to watch, to report what's involved. So I have to ask, okay, fine, that's all great. And usually I have this thing with Paul, so I start chatting back and forth with him, and I say, okay, fine, that's all well and good. What are the nuts and bolts of that? How does it actually work? In other words, what are the measures? How do I know when I've achieved that? Imagine if you subject yourself to that kind of torture, when you come to Scripture and say, that's really cool. And so many people stop. They start here with, okay, here's some facts, here's some information. Got that. Makes sense to me. And the second thing usually is where you see all the imperatives. Don't do this, something. And you say, I agree with that. And this is where most people stop, like in their approach to Scripture. They start with the knowledge side of it, the factual side of it, like the cognitive, propositional side of it. Then they get to, oh yeah, I agree with that. Like give God a high five or something. I agree with that. But then they never get to the point of how does this actually work out? How does it, in other words, could you turn it back on yourself. So I'll like flip it back on myself and say, okay, that's that. But is that present here? And what are the measures by that? How will I know? How do I know that standard's been met? Or how do I know that I'm hitting the mark there? How do I know? So I like having these conversations with Paul. I like doing that. I haven't lost my mind yet. But I like having those conversations, you know, like, we'll see, how does that work then, Paul? And Paul gives us neat little glimpses whenever you see him switch to the first person. You know, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me. And the life that I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Well, we quote that, right? And we say, I can theologically take that apart. I am in Christ. And, you know, we get into all the theology of that. What does that say about the actual guy? And what he's doing is, this is my testimony. He's saying, this is how I actually acknowledge who I am in Christ and how I live every single day. And I love those little first person kind of things. It's a little glimpse into Paul and how he lives and his whole attitude and his struggles and all this. So like you go to Romans chapter 7, you see struggles. You know, this is what I want to be, but I don't hit it. And then this happens and this, and you see it going back and forth, right? Oh, wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death? You know, he says. But I thank God through Jesus Christ, right? So he knows his own personal limitations, but then he's willing to see those in relation to what Jesus brings into the whole thing. You know, and that's good. But then that tells me a little bit. It tells me, okay, I get it, Paul. I see how you're working through this. So he didn't write like a theology textbook. You know, he's given us stuff that you actually live. You know, let it live out. He's sort of showing us, and that's what he's doing with the believers in Ephesus. You know, and they're facing all kinds of what, you know, pagan temples, and you know, people coming out of that. And just being introduced to who Jesus is. And I think about this too. What would it have been like to have been in Ephesus with Paul's ministry and listening to this, hearing stuff like, what? Who? What? What's he talking about? We can't, maybe now we're starting to get to where that makes sense in the United States as we get post-Christian, as we're fairly post-Christian and all that stuff. We can actually, believe it or not, in Fulton County and in Gloversville, we can actually be talking to people that go, who? What? You know, like that. We can, you know, that is if we're willing to get outside of our hermetically sealed Christian, you know, thing like that. And I say that in love, but I'm just saying, they got to poke your head outside there once in a while and actually bump shoulders with people who say, who? What? Like that. And when you go all the way back here, these are, when you see Paul writing this, see, sometimes we think, Paul's writing this to sophisticated American congregations who are saturated with their doctrinal and theological understanding. No, they didn't know anything, right? So everybody who doesn't know anything, you know, put your hand up. Well, not really, but don't. But if you don't, you know, you just say, I don't know anything. Great, because this is for you. You know, this is why he wrote it. And I know it's complex and it's difficult, but yet this was the purpose. He's trying to tell them, you remember how you were and all this stuff, but now listen, this is who you are. Who you were, how you were, this is now who you are, and this is how you should be in relation to that, because something has changed. And he goes into great detail in the first 3 chapters to sort of explain that. We'd say great detail, there's not much there. There it is. There's the great detail, everyone. And yet that's enough, because that'll blow your mind. You know, Ephesians chapter 1, if it doesn't blow your mind, you don't have one, you know, but I'm sorry. But it will. But it's not the purpose of it, is it? The purpose of it is to establish your faith, to give you confidence, you know, that not so you walk away all perplexed and confused, but you say, wow, this is just awesome. I can't explain it, but look at what God has done in me. That's what God has done in me. I didn't do it. You know, this is what God has done. And then in the latter part, this is how it works out. So I'm just suggesting all this is a part of this idea of preparedness, readiness. He is saying there's a serious, serious problem here. And the problem is if there's some type of imminent threat that wants to destroy the strength of that assembly. Just think about anything. What does a fractured army look like? I mean, how effective is a disunified, anything? But I'm saying outside of the unity issue, let's put that off to the side and just say we're talking about the imminent threat. And he's saying, listen, there's a threat to this, so we ought to be ready. We have to acknowledge. Then he's going to get real specific, isn't he? Because when you go like, ooh, one more page, that's it, and Ephesians is gone. One more page, and 6. And starting in verse 10, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might, put on the whole armor of God that you might be able to fall over. That you might be able to stand right against the schemes of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, principalities, powers, blah, 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 right? And so you think, well, that's where he's getting to. But he's building to that. And he's going to get really, really specific. And say, that's the one. That's the one that we have to be careful of. So do we, this is just a rhetorical question, we suffer from a lack of satanic attack preparedness? Do we lack that? Or do we suffer from the ignorance of that? We just don't know about it. It's possible, you could have a new believer. And this is a particularly Christian worldview, but you could have people in the ancient world at that time, Satan, who? What? Yeah. What is that, right? They're totally unaware of that. It'd be like sending them off into a lion's den, and they aren't aware of, here, kitty, kitty. They don't know, right? They don't know the danger. And so the stuff, what I'm saying, that in the 21st century, to us who have sat in pews that, read the Bible, all this, but this is like, it's not just to be parked in a doctrinal statement, but it's saying there really is an imminent threat. And we have to be on high alert about it. We certainly don't want to be ignorant. We don't want to be tolerant of it. Which is another interesting thing. We don't want to just be permissive about it, live those type of lives. So somewhere we have to engage. There's a stand, right? There's a stand, Paul says, hey, that you can make your stand. Not one step backward. And in Ephesians 4, he's going to say what? Don't give a foothold. Don't give a foothold. Verse 27. Do you see that? 27. Do not give the devil a foothold. That's not one step back. I'm not, this ground, see this ground right here? This ground, bought and paid for by the blood of Christ. Bought and paid for, you're not getting 1 inch of it. You don't deserve it. It's not yours. It doesn't belong to you. It's that, don't give him a foothold. Some of the translations, what does it say? Like, don't give place. Don't give place. No opportunity. But that makes sense. Because obviously, foothold is a metaphor. Somebody's not going to clobber you with their foot. Yeah. Don't give them an opportunity. So then you look at the broader context of the passage, right? What would be the opportunity? If you really look at it. Giving way to the temptation to, what? What does he talk about? Anger, strife, these types of things, deceitful desires, all this stuff that's endemic. Just say, I'm a human, I do that. I'm a human. I can do it with the best of them. I'm human, right? And that's all of us. But he's saying that kind of thing has to be consciously. When you spot it, consciously put over here. What's the new man's reaction to that? In other words, who's the new man? But the one who lives under the dominion of the Holy Spirit. Cultivating the Holy Spirit at work in your life. That's the new man. Old man is me paying no attention to God. I don't want to hear about it. I'm going to do what I want, that kind of thing. And so that just corrupts any work that God is doing. So imminent threat, imminent threat, imminent threat. There's an enemy then. This is what we know. There's an enemy who desires to attack you imminently, anytime, fiercely. That's how he comes at you. Overwhelmingly, and best of all, covertly. You didn't see it coming. And so what is he telling these people, like these new believers, here in this community? That isn't just that person talking about that person, or these two fussing with each other. It isn't that. It isn't about that. It's that you're not recognizing it for what it is. And once you recognize it for what it is, you can say, no, because this is corrosive. This is going to kill us. This is going to kill our, whatever we're going to be in Ephesus. How are we going to reach Ephesus if that's how we are, or something like that, But again, not saying so much what they're doing, but just calling attention to the fact for each of us together and collectively to say, hey, there's an imminent threat. If there is an imminent threat, and we know that, then what measures do we take? Right? There's a big discussion now, geopolitically in the world, big discussion. What are we going to do about the guy that wants to set off, detonate something in the Pacific? And what are we going to do? What are we going to do? All this stuff. And so someone has to decide what measures are going to be taken because there's an imminent threat. To the same degree, that's us every day. I mean, every day. And we always seem to think about it when something disastrous happens, but that's every single day, right? What's your strategy and all that? So I think, just me thinking, that readiness is proportional. Readiness is proportional to the degree that we're aware that that threat is imminent and that threat is real. Who says real and present danger or something like that? I don't know. But, and we all do, right? We all do. We know what we believe, but how much of that, what we believe, really takes root and impacts how we live, the decisions that we make? See, I can know, again, here's the facts. There's a devil who poses an imminent threat to my spiritual sort of well-being. My ability to serve Christ could be impaired to the degree that I yield to this temptation, all this stuff, right? And so there's the fact, and I know that, and I can agree wholeheartedly, no question. But if I take no steps to do anything, so, it's like just our recent situation with people that want to, visit us uninvited. Let's say we have people in Gloversville that decide they're going to cut through, and we don't know. And I get, so what do I do knowing that? What do I do? There's people that walk right into our house, what outside, how many locks can I put on the place? What do I do? So I'm there fussing with it yesterday with one of them motion sensor things. Hey, let's throw some light on it. I don't know, right? But I mean, you take measures. You do something to mitigate this, right? You do something. If I believe that, there's an imminent threat, then I'm going to do something. First, Paul would say, I'm going to monitor myself to be sure I'm not one of those people that are causing, that I've not been deceived, into saying, whoa, wait a minute. That just came out of my mouth. Why did I say that? Or something like that, right? Okay. All right, so let's take this one. Someone might say, because I believe in the providence of God, and I do. I absolutely do. We say God's sovereign, and he is. But then we say, we believe in the providence. As a matter of fact, back in old New England, back then, back around, let's say, Jonathan Edwards and all those guys, God was providence with a capital P. like that. That was their way of talking about God, because God sees all, knows all, helps, this type of thing. So we'd say, I'm just going to rely on God's providence. I'm not being concerned about this imminent threat. After all, God will take care of me. So I could make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So here's 10 passages, which we don't have time for, but I'm just saying, here's 10. So I'd say, fine, if that's you, and you say, I'm relying totally on God's providence, just let him take care of it, because I really trust God. I could make a case for you. I could make a pretty good case for you, right? The angel of the Lord encamps around all, those that fear him, those type of things. I could find all these passages. He'll give his angels charge over you. His angels are ministering spirits, yeah. I mean, it could really, really go to town on this stuff. Could go anecdotally to people like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There was a fourth man in the fire standing with him. You could just go all over the place, right? But God's care doesn't absolve us of living, let's say, how we approach living on the battlefield. Well, first you have to characterize the world that way, as a battlefield. So a child could say, well, my parents are home, so I'm safe. Therefore, I can do anything I want and nothing will happen to me. Or it doesn't matter who I let into the house. But there's some responsibility there, isn't there? Even though knowing there's somebody there that will care about, but there's some responsibility. It's like saying, well, since God has forgiven me of everything, I can do anything I want. No one would think that way, right? No one who understands Paul would think that way, right? So, the Bible underscores the fact that here's God who cares for his people, but there's also our personal responsibility to act rightly in every situation. So it reveals the character of our enemy. There's this imminent danger, the imminent danger posed by living in a fallen world, right? So one, to keep a heightened state of awareness, and to encourage us to be secure, and to defend against this foe. Secure and defend. Those are two things. Two things. You can secure something without defending it. But I'm just suggesting, right? So we're hyper vigilant. Hey, David. How are you, buddy? Good to see you. So we're hyper vigilant. We've got our eyes wide open. We're hyper vigilant. But then what's your plan? This is really cool. If this was a dialogue, it'd be fun. Because what's your plan? Maybe yours is better than mine. What's your plan? And we all compare notes, and we'll get the plan out of this thing, right? So it's like, if you're ready, that means that somebody's coming at you. And for the football guys, you've watched all the game films ahead of time. You know everything. You know the strategy. You know all this stuff. But what are you going to do? So here's this battlefield, and this battle's engaged on three fronts, right? We generally say, like, the world, the flesh, and the devil. We say it like that because those are three independent things. There's the world, which is the fallen system. The devil, who's this imminent personal threat, and then the flesh, which is just to say who I am when I don't put off the old man in that situation. Then you get to see old Doug, and he's no fun. He's not helping the cause. He's like a ball and chain on the whole progress of this. So it's not helping. So those are the three. Here's another thing. There's another thing, and just preaching to the choir, but I'm saying many people can defend the faith. We're just good. We're good at that. That's what we do. You live in the West. If you're European, Great Britain, whatever, North American, you're in the West, very logical. This is how we go. It's all, I know the facts and I agree with the facts. It never gets to the third one. We got the first two. We know all this stuff. We can defend the faith and then permit Satan to make a shambles of our life. I mean, without looking around the room at each other, just look across the last 30 years at how many of the big lights within Christianity have. But then, that's picking on the big guys. And there's just as many that fall by the wayside. Defend it, but then permit Satan to make a shambles. And not to heap guilt on anybody for anything. I'm just saying it's a reality. Why? Because we're not vigilant, So let me just say for a second something about imminent versus existential threats. I can say that now. Existential threats. Why? Because that's what you hear in the media. They say, oh, they pose an existential threat. We've got to do something. So let's just pull this apart because I think it's awesome. I think it's a really cool point. I know the words imminent and existential, you probably want to fall asleep when I start talking like that. But just listen. There is a difference. And I think this really relates to what Paul's talking about here. So we talk about existential threats. North Korea, China, who else? Iran, and Russia, right? Who among all of them is an existential threat? Which ones are imminent and which ones are existential? So what does existential mean? It means someone who can come and permanently change let's say, who among those nations can actually permanently change our way of life? Who can take it away from us and completely change it, And really of the four, and I could go into some detail, but of the four, do we really think North Korea is going to change, are they capable of, Russia probably of all of them. Let's just say, we could argue, but who cares? I'll let you be right, I don't care. But I'm just saying, that's an existential threat. Existential threat can take it all away from me. Can just take it away. That's why we have a defense, right? To protect our way of life, right? We carry over that in the spiritual realm, right? And what does the Bible tell us? Look at just Paul in Romans 8:31-39. Nothing shall separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus. Nothing. Listen, for a child of God, there are no existential threats. Zero. There is nothing that can come and take away what God has done. God's not going to take it away. He's the doer. So this is where Scripture is emphatic and screams about this. There are no existential threats. But there's an imminent threat. Right? It can't take away your life as a Christian, but it can really mess with your well-being as a Christian. If we understand it that way. The quality of your life. And your ability. Remember we said the kingdom grows in here and then out here. So we're growing, in our character, Christ-likeness. And then we want to see the kingdom extended, out here. We want to see more people come to know Jesus as their Savior. So we have this imminent threat, no existential threat. Now have you thought about this? There is an existential threat, but it's Satan's problem, not yours. Have you thought about that? Here's Satan. The existential threat to Satan was this. And when you read how this relates to Satan and his work, destroy. Destroy the works of the devil here. So here's the thing, and here's what Satan knows. He knows a death blow is what he received at the cross. You received life. He was destroyed. You're given life. He's destroyed. He doesn't want you to know that. He wants you to live like he poses this type of, But we have to be aware, on heightened awareness. So if somehow, Ephesians 4, if somehow these people are ignorant of that and just go on ripping each other apart and go on, all this stuff, he says you're giving him a foothold. You're giving him place where he doesn't belong. You're giving him an opportunity where he should have none. And you have to take notice of that. Why? Because it's going to wreck the growth in here, and it's going to wreck the advancement of the kingdom out here. It's not, he isn't necessarily writing about, come on, you people, get along. Stop talking about each other, get along. Okay, on one level. But he's saying, do you realize that this is totally related to our ability to serve, to our ability to be effective in the kingdom? So don't give a foothold into your assemblies. And he is saying that this type of activity, deceitful desires, wrong attitudes of the mind, this type of thing, subverts the work of the kingdom. But that's exactly what Satan wants to do. So he wants to, we got a massive problem in the United States. I don't know if you know it or not. Of course you do. And it's just exacerbated, there's another word, here in Fulton County, because we feel it. We really do. We feel this whole thing. Nobody's got to convince us. We feel it. We have a growing number. It has been tracked over the past 30 years of data. This growing number of those who are now, it's up to 40,000 in the county. That's 40,000 people in the county that are, so we could say, so there's like 15,000 Christians or something. That's not what we're saying. But there are 15,000 people who are more of the church attending something or claim to be part of something. 40,000 that are not, and that number's growing. Across the United States, growing. So my brother, you met him last week again, right? So Dick is now retired, and he's working with a consulting firm. He works with a lot of the multi-site, some of the larger kind of mega-type churches in the world, and these are multi-site types things, and we had these, very interesting discussions. But one of the things, living in Plano, Texas, just north on the tollway, out of Dallas. This is like the buckle of the Bible Belt. And they're seeing numbers now where it's on the decline, really for the first time. So you could say, why? Why? And we're facing problems out here, philosophically, naturalism has embedded itself in the school system, and we're seeing the byproduct of that. You know that this stuff, most of us that can see the trajectory from the 60s on, we know this. And the stuff doesn't happen overnight. You don't wake up one morning and where are all the believers? Why are all the churches closed? What's going on? Why don't I have these freedoms anymore? And you start going back. See, most of these things are just subtle, and then they begin to take root until all of a sudden, boom, and there it is, and it's gone. One brick at a time out of the foundation. But then within the church, sadly. Why? Because we lost our focus out here. We stopped going all in out here. And we have become kind of like comfortable among people who are like us. I mean, really, it's who we are. People that think like us, people that talk like us, people that act like us, people that dress like us. Wow, we perfected that to a fault. This is what the haircuts look like. This is what here's your Christian uniform. This is what you wear your Sunday go to meeting clothes or whatever, right? So we all live this. We all know all this stuff. And yet we took our eye off the ball. And so we began focusing inward. You know how that happened? What happens then? We start having internal issues and all this stuff. So it's right on the money with what Paul was talking about. This is what he's trying to forecast, and this is what he's trying to say. Hey, recognize it for what it is. And most often we don't. Most often we personalize it. And so when we hear something, we get offended by that or somebody, this person, forget the person. I don't mean that, but I mean, yeah, love the person. But I mean, forget blaming the person per se and see it for what it is. And what he's saying is when you see this stuff manifested in your group, recognize there's an imminent threat who's poking at this, and it's the root of all this. Come together, bond together, unify together, and pose a unified front, not one step back. And until those folks in Leningrad got together and said, no way, there's not going to be any breach in this wall. And so we don't, the devil wants to take the weakest link, that type of thing, if it can break the chain. So, it's this unity. That's what it's about. Unity. Not tearing each other down, building each other up. Isn't that what Paul talks about? Building each other up, strengthening them, and this type of thing. Instead of saying, you know what, so-and-so, or this or that, and the other thing. Recognize. My word. Satan's a master at convincing you it's really her fault. It's really his fault. It's him. It's her. It's this or that. But say, no, it's you. It's you, Satan. Not letting him pull the strings. But you can't improve on the church. You can't. You can't improve on what God has done and what God has made. You can't, but it has to be the church. And when it is, nothing can stop it. It's not a matter of how big or how small or anything. Nothing can stop it. Nothing. It's incredible. I've seen it the world over. I've seen people being shot. I've seen, my first little foray out of the country was in the mid-1980s and went to El Salvador in the Civil War. And Sally will tell you, we had a dear pastor there in Mesquite, Texas, and he thought I'd lost touch with my mind, That's a theme now because I've mentioned it twice. He said, what are you, nuts? You got a family. And we had, how many do we have? The three amigos then? Yeah, so we had the first three. And he's like, are you nuts? Yeah, there were 600 adult decisions that week. This is incredible. Street preaching in San Salvador, 150,000 every 15 minutes blowing through. And here's Doug with a mic and a guy doing something in Spanish. Beautiful singing in Spanish and then translating. So we're doing all this stuff. Great. Going out in the community showing movies. People are sitting up in the trees, a couple thousand watching it and stuff like that. That week, 4 of their members gunned down on the front of the street. Buses being blown up. You didn't want to congregate in big crowds. It was a crazy situation. But what was the strength? Miramonte. Iglesia Miramonte. And I don't speak Spanish. That was me not speaking Spanish. So there, and it was fairly good size, 2,500, 3,000 congregation. And these people like this. So much so that when we came in, we're preaching, we're evangelizing, whatever. Okay, yeah, who are you? What's your testimony? They're having communion like every time they meet. And it's closed, not open. It's closed. So they want to know, are you a believer? Do you, I don't care if I just heard you preaching out there. What's your testimony? But these people just embracing each other, loving on each other. And they just had 4 people gunned down on the front steps. And you see this the world over. See, that's our strongest thing. But only when we recognize that there's an imminent threat to all of this. But what's the threat? The threat is to the advancement of the kingdom, right? And so if I take that seriously and say, listen, today's the day, I don't know if I have tomorrow, people I meet, people I talk to, people that God brings into my life, hey, am I going to be effective? Am I going to be effective or not effective? To the degree that I understand that there is an imminent threat to the cause of Christ, an imminent threat. He wants to neutralize us, intimidate us, deceive us. So Jesus gave us a great example. You can read it in Matthew 4, 1 through 11. Jesus gives a great example of how to, and we haven't. So I leave you with one. 2641. Can you guess the book? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, the flesh is weak. F.B. Meyer, great preacher from 1,000,000 years ago, would put a capital S on this. Capital S. You know, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Watch and pray. What's the context? A night in the garden. Guys couldn't stay awake. Guys couldn't. Yeah. Lord, thank you. Thank you for your word. Thank you for letting us meander just all over the place today. But somehow we'll get something. We just want to get the fact that when we're seated here, the thread is here. When we're walk out the door, the thread is there. That we don't have to live like tortured people or live in fear. That's not the point, because we know Satan's defeated. But yet, it's a fallen world, and he just loves to convince us that we're powerless against temptation. He loves to convince us that we deserve the right to have attitudes and all these things that are just corrosive to the progress of your life in us, and then our effectiveness to share Christ with others around us. And just Lord, we want this to be encouraging and hopeful, and we want to know that we're empowered to do this. And you've given us your Spirit, and I pray that we just give him free access. Free access. Give us vigilance. Give us watchfulness. Help us to be prayerful, and use us. Lord, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.